Okay, so we've moved on a bit and we've gone around and done the rest of all these panels. So it's really brought them to life. We've put the control sticks in, we've painted them up, and as you can see, it's really getting to be there. I've used the references for picking out various colours, pretty much the same colour all over. Now what we need to do now is give this a slight little bit of weathering. Two things we need to do. We need to bring out the demarcation lines between the instrument panels. Normally they're sort of, it's whitish type of colour, but what it is literally the paint colour underneath showing through, but they tend to come through as white. There's a way of doing that by putting a wash on and mixing it through and letting the capillary action go round. The trouble is we want to do a wash first. So for the wash, this is literally Indian ink mixed up with a lot of acrylic thinners. Literally Indian ink goes absolute miles, so you don't need much at all. So all we're going to do now with a clean brush is just give this a quick wash over. Now I want it to be quite a thin wash, so what I'm going to do, I've got a pot here. Just pop it over to one side. I'm going to put some acrylic thinners in there like that. Take a brush full of the ink, mix it in with the thinners, just to mix it down a little bit because it is extremely strong. And that way it should give us a more of a dirty wash than anything else. So obviously we'll start on the floor and give it a white brown. You probably see it going there, and what it will do is bring out all the highlights, bring out obviously all the panel line detail, everything else like that, and give us a bit of a grubby look to the entire cockpit. But what this will do, this will fade back, it's not going to stay like this, but obviously because this is quite a lot of thinners in here, we don't want to be hanging around too long. We need to get this on and then get out of the way. So literally if it's starting to get like that, it's going a little bit in the colour. The back. And these feet. Side panels, but say it's glancing blows. Don't drag it round too much. Otherwise before you know it, got real trouble. So there we go, you can probably see it in there. That will dry back a lot lighter, just like that. Okay, and as I say, if you've got too much in there, just give it a tap. But what you want to do is let this naturally evaporate on its own, because the thing is, if you don't, you could end up sort of taking the paint back off. But literally it's just a quick one, and it just brings out sort of a little bit of grime here and there and gives it that look. So what you can do to speed that up, get an airbrush, I'll do it slightly out of sight, and just dry it down. Keep the air moving on it, and it'll be as if you're drying it. I can't do this on the desk unfortunately, because otherwise I'm going to end up blowing it everywhere. But just dry that back a little bit where it's needed. Okay, dead simple with that one. We can do the same with the actual arm rest areas. Now I've painted them black, picked out all the little bits as we said before, so we're taking a little bit of this, hanging around a little bit too much for my liking. There we go, just over these, and this will just bring out all those details and bring them to life. But as I say, because it is thinners on here, do not hang around. Literally tap it on, let the capillary action do the work, and literally one pass with a brush will do you nicely, but it will give you this type of grimy look to it, and obviously the details all stand out a little bit better. Okay, so we just do it like that. That's those done. One more to go, which is handy because we're running out of the wash. There we go, so that's those all done. Okay, the actual method for doing the lines that I use, you could use very thin paint, capillary action, tap it on and let it work its way around the actual panel lines and everything else between them. Only trouble with that is if it goes wrong, it tends to go everywhere and bleach through and everything else. There's a couple of other techniques. You can do it with thinners and let the thinners work its way around there. It tends to absorb a little bit of the undercolour and come through, but one of the safest ways I like to do it is with a little bit of wash. So we take a nice clean brush. Okay, and then what we do, we get a little bit of the wash on the camera. So if we can get the camera to lock in, Then all we do is come along and we're just going to touch the panel lines and around the switches. The thing with this way is this is totally safe. It's not going to ruin your, melt into your plastic, melt your paint and all things like that. And also it will give it a slight dusty look around the switches, which is quite a nice touch if you want it to be more of a weathered look. But you'll notice once the bubbles all disappear and pop off and do their bit, you're left with it in the panel lines just a little bit going on around there. So just do these up here. But it is a way of bringing it all to life. Just don't do it anywhere you've got thinners. Let me just do this rear bit and then we can show you. Just around there, so hopefully the camera can lock in and you can see it. And say it's a little bit glossy at the moment, but you can see it will just give the switches and everything, and as it dries you'll get a little bit aligned with the demarcation lines, you know, certainly around these switches down here. But as I say, on camera like that, it's pretty hard to pick out until it's dried off. So what we're going to do, we do the same with the rear ones. We'll let that dry off, come back, show you how it is, and we can start to really bring the cockpit area together. Okay, now it's quite chaotic, obviously, as you can see around here. I try and work as clean as possible, but it's obviously, as you can see, not always the way. Now the thing is, we've got lots of different things going on here to explain, and a little bit too many for my liking. So what I'm going to do is talk you through a couple of them now. What we're going to do, we're going to do these cockpits. Now, and what we need to do now is the TV screens. Obviously we've got the LED and fibre optic cables going to come through, but we need it to shine against something to give us our light. So the kit itself comes with these, a couple of decals for them. Now normally you'd put these on the clear parts behind, shine through, and away you go. We need them to sort of come through a little bit better. So what we're going to do now, just on, I've got a little bit of water, as you would do normal decaling, okay? So we just soak that a minute. I don't know how long these are going to take. All right, so as those are soaking just for a second, I'll explain what we need to do. Now make sure you get the right type of intake, because you get the big mouth and the small mouth, okay? The small mouth, try and get it right away in. The small mouth F-16s, which this one is what we call the common bay. It means they can accept the different engines all in one bay. They have the smaller mouth. The bigger one, which is like the big mouth on there, I think that's the Block 52s, that one only takes the one engine. The one type of engine, so you need both of them in there. Now the thing is, ours is going to be a little bit more complicated than anybody else doing it, because obviously we need to fit the electrics. Now the electrics that are going to go in here, it says, hopefully he's got them right here in our little bag of wiring. We've got one little setup here, if we can just find the one, here it is this one here. Now right on the end here we have, if we just bring you in a bit, you can see a bit better. We've got two tiny little, what we call seed LEDs, these little yellow ones down here. Now the great thing with these, they are extremely small, they're very flat, and you can fit them on this particular wire. And this particular wire itself is great because we can fit it through almost anything. Now we need to get it to go around obviously the outside slip area, if you like, is where this one is going to go on and through. Now we should be able just about make it through by my reckoning with this bit of cable. But what we need to do is a few things to these intakes before we start playing around with cables and things like that. The first thing we need to do is make a seamless join down on the inside. Now I've used liquid cement and we've gone round in the base here, and you can probably see it's not too bad actually in here, but it's not great. We want it to be totally smooth and everything else. A couple of techniques to it. The way I do this one is with liquid cement. I put them in, I use a long brush, okay, and we come in and literally paint liquid cement in there, leave it completely for a couple of days, completely go off. Then we take some cellulose thinners, okay, and then this is where it's a little bit tricky on this because obviously it's rained. We take quite a bit, flooded the cotton bud on the end or the Q-tip, and all we do is rub it up and down. Okay, and what we're trying to do is melt the inside of the the join, the plastic and all that area around it. Now it has to be cellulose or lacquer thinner, depending where you are in the world. Okay, and what happens is it slowly will start to melt the glue, the plastic and everything around it. What you want to do is literally just keep working it and rubbing it, making sure it's nice and wet, and it will slowly polish it all together, and you should get almost a seamless line. And try and catch it in the light and look down it to see how it is. When it starts to dry out, re-flood it again. Okay, and what happens is you will see it slightly go milky a little bit. Now the thing is, if you start to do it and it starts to drag, by I mean dragging, you can feel it tugging, okay, wet your cotton bud a little bit more, because otherwise it's going to scuff it up and, to be honest, make a worse mess than it had in the first place. And that's not a good sign either, where you lose the head off your cotton bud. Okay, just down to the other end. And then you look down at it, you can usually see exactly where you're at. But you can sort of polish it all in. Okay, just keep it all wet. I don't know how well you're going to see this actually in the light. It's going to be one of those ones. You see this top one, we try and catch it in the light. It's all looking smooth up there compared to the bottom one we've still got to do. Okay, so we do exactly the same with them the both way around. And then what should happen is when we spray it in and everything else like that, it should look very nice and all done. Now, depending on this seam, how well you did it will depend how much it is. If you want to, and I've done it lots of times before, there's loads of my videos on showing me doing this. If you put a little bit of putty in there, liquid putty in there first, with the thinners again, it all sort of works in very, very nicely. What you get for using cheap cotton buds, the heads fall off. So note to self, keep with the more expensive ones. But there we go, we're looking quite nice down there. We can give this a little bit more of a fiddle, but we're pretty much there. I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking that's probably going to be good enough. So we'll just move these out of the way, because I want them eating through my net. Next thing we've got to do, we've got to take off this front wheel well, because obviously we've got a replacement one here. You know, there's no nice ways of doing this one. You can use a knife, you can actually then, or just come in with some heavy duty sanding stuff, but literally just carve this one completely off and out the way. You know, I don't know, probably the best way to do it, because we're trying to carve in here, just trying to. Okay, as long as you carve it quite nicely. Okay, if we just chop this off, I'm going to do a real quick job on this just to get rid of it, literally like this. And then what we'll do is we'll get back and with some very heavy duty files is literally sand this completely off until it's completely flush and flat down. As soon as that's flat down, we'll carry on with that in a moment. Now we're hoping the decals are done here. So what we need some clear film just for these to stick to, because otherwise if it's literally a bit of plastic, we might end up piercing it with our fibre optic. So the easiest way I'm going to do that, we've got the old bit of clear plastic here. So we just cut that down. Taking a very oversized bit, because then we can cut it to our exact size we need. Okay, so we'll just take our decal, put a bit of water as you would normally would on the actual carrier film area itself. Okay, then we're just going to take our first one, stick it down, and our other two, try and rotate. Now these are real generic, basic multi-function displays, which, totally honest, don't look anything like a real one. So if you wanted to, obviously you could spend a bit of time and do a more professional, better job than the ones that are on here. So that's those done, so we'll just give them a bit of a push and a tap. Now, because we want these to stick down very, very nicely, what we're going to do, we're just going to take a little bit of acrylic thinners. Okay, this is X-20A, you can use your decals, softeners, whatever you want to do, and we're just going to paint over, because we want those to weld on totally on, but that gives you an idea of what we've got, just like that. Then what we can do, once that's dried, cut them out, trim them out completely, and then they will fit into the holes in here, and then we can get the fibre optics all up and in and everything else and move our way through. So you've got a couple of things to be getting on with right there. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to take care of obviously getting rid of this wheel well, front wheel well, so we can get the resin one fixed on. We're going to let this just dry off a second. Okay, then we can have a bit of a clear up and we can fit on these wheel wells and start detailing up the wheel wells. Okay, so we've moved on just a little bit. A few problems we've come across we're going to talk about now. First of all is, you might be able to see the back cockpit all installed, everything else looking like that very nicely. Trouble that we've had with it is when we came along and we did the decals on this little piece of plastic sheet, you couldn't see through them, so we had to pull it all apart and get it all apart again and try it again. So what that is just this plastic sheet cut to size. Well, actually I scratched off the decal so I had exactly the right size, and then painted green, so then when you hold it up to the light you get a nice feed through. Now the trouble with that is that some of them are brighter than others because of the differences in the green paint. So let's show you on the front one. So we've got all of these installed in here now. So if I just take my mobile phone and we find a slightly bright screen, he says, looking desperately for something light. So if you take the phone, I'm hoping you'll be able to see what we've got here. So when you hold it up to the light, you can see them coming through there now. So we got, the camera can lock in, so when you take them away, you can see them. Now obviously when we've got an LED in that will be a lot brighter than what you're seeing there, but hopefully what you can do, you can just sort of get the feel of how it will look. Now the thing is, what we've actually got to do now is paint this screen. So as you can see, this one here, it's got a clear one in there, the top and the bottom. So what we need to do is just brush on a tiniest amount of green paint. Now this is my old green, which really should invest in a new one because it's not very nice at all. So it's a bit thick, a bit gooey. Okay, so all we're going to do is literally just coming along now, and we're just going to brush some green onto the screens. Same on the other one. Okay, now if I can, I'm going to put a tiny dab of green on the top one as well, without making a complete mess, just in up here for the radar warning receiver. Okay, just to try and make it look a little bit green, which it should do if I just hold it up to the light. Yep, that works for me. Okay, so that's those done. Now, to be honest, I'm not 100% happy with how this has turned out. I really had this feeling of having the screens looking like they're going to be totally clear and everything else. Now that, I think, is the drawback with using fibre optics. Fibre optics are great for making pinpricks of light. You know, don't get me wrong, they're absolutely fantastic. And like for doing little bits of light, as you'll see them when it's all wired up, absolutely great. What I think would work better, and I would like to do in the future if I have more of them, but unfortunately I haven't and we're under a time constraint here. You might have showed you these little tiny LEDs, these little grape ones. These I think would fit better in there, one in each one, and do it like that. They're brighter, it's a more constant light, and you don't have to worry about obviously bending around fibre optics and everything else. The only trouble is obviously you need multiple sources, you're going to need a higher voltage to go around it, and everything else like that. Now we'll just test fit this in here now. So hopefully this should come in here and we'll settle down just in where we want it to go. Because obviously we've got the fibre optics are pushing away from it. But what it should do at the front here is make a nice little bunch, which we then can cut to length, and then we can install our light source into. So, but what I'm going to do is obviously pinch the wiring. What I'm going to do is just take a little bit more out of this front hole here. So we just make it a touch bigger. So hopefully it will sit in without pinching too much and things like that. Right, we should get away with that now. So what we're going to do now is just pop along a tiny bit of super glue just down the bottom. Obviously we can give it a bit of a clean later. Just give that a bit of a blow. Okay, do the same on the other side. Kick out again. This is really just for speed. You can obviously hold this. I want to let go of it. So just hoping it will all go through. So we just hold this a sec. And there we go with the lights rigged up. So I know on camera they look a little bit circular-fied, but you see both multifunction displays at the front. We've got the ones at the back, we've got the lights in the middle, which they look a lot better to the naked eye. For some reason the camera picks them up a little bit odd, but hopefully you can see the various ones in there. And so there's a couple really can't really see on camera, but you got a lot better on the radar warning receivers as well, because they're lit up at the top. But there we go, that shows it with the cockpit installed. Now obviously we've cut the seat belts off. If I just unpull this, take those out. We've got the cockpit isn't actually in here at the moment, it's literally just sat just to have a look at. But the thing is, it shows us how it's all going to go, and we've got the crewmen here. So if we poke their feet in, and because they're footless, they fit in there quite nicely. Got various gestures for their hands to do, obviously holding control grips and things like that. Some are, some aren't. So that goes on. We've still got some more bits to do with the cockpit. We've got to put on the oxygen bottles, a few little decals and things go on there to tidy it up. But we needed it, well, I needed it to get that sorted and finished. So I know exactly where we can and where we can't move on and things like that. Just unplug that battery. So the couple of things we've done, we've actually got the main part of the wheel wells, this Aries set here. If you're going to build it, you have to build it up. And then we've actually super glued this top part on the top. Move that out of the way. Then what happens is it's going to come along and it will lock onto the front half just like this, giving us our one-piece intake. Now we've got the compressor blade fan at the back here, so that needs to be painted as well, and we'll go on. Obviously we can do that titanium or something, or a darker silver, something like that, and we've got to spray the actual tubes. But in the meantime what we can do is put all the gear and everything together. So remember we said about taking this off. One little tip, I don't know if you can see it, see they've got the square box around the outside? Well, a bit of thought was really, before I cut it all off, I actually went round, picture this as being the old one, and scraped around a blade just around it, because I knew when I sanded it off I wouldn't know exactly where it is. So by doing it this way it gives us a good idea of where it is and how it's got to go. So what we can do now, we can super glue this back into position. So we'll just line it up again, front and rear, all in there. Then what we'll do, we'll take some super glue, we're going to put a good dollop on the back, and we're going to let the capillary action do its bit. A bit of kicker will basically speed it up and hold it in place. Okay, so all fitted in there, as we said. Now, did a bit of a test fit, and it's a good idea to do it. And basically what we want to do is make sure that this nose wheel all still lines up. Now I must admit, when I did this I felt it was a little bit too tight, so I've just sanded it off, literally just a little bit off the top here, just to obviously reduce its height a little bit, and now I find it fits in there a lot nicer and is how it should be. Now with all these things, they should be white, and that's quite handy because we can spray them all in one. So let's just get a bit of kitchen towel here, and then obviously with our parts, move the camera around a little. So then what we can do is a real quick, easy technique to spraying white. White is a colour I tend to go through lots of, so I must admit I do buy in bulk, which is quite handy. So flat white, this is normal Tamiya XF2 flat white, okay? Good old mix, because this is a brand new bottle, so it's been kicking around probably a little bit. So it does tend to separate. Okay, now lots of people have trouble spraying white because obviously you get runs and all the rest of it. Well, if you see me do cockpit spraying and things like that, all I do is spray it neat. Okay, so what we've got here, brand new bottle, straight in the colour cup, quite a bit of it. Just to get this out of the way. Okay, so check our flow. happy how it's coming through, not happy how the needle's sitting. So we just change that a little. That's better. So what we're going to do, starting deep inside, okay, we're literally just spraying it. Now we're keeping it quite close to the towel at the bottom deliberately, so it makes a bit of a vortex in there, and it stops it just blowing clean out the bottom. Okay, halfway through, okay. Bit bigger this end so you get your nozzle of your airbrush deeper in there. So sort of using stabbing motions to spray the inside. Okay, every now and again we're going to come out, because what you get on the end here, see the white little blob at the top, is a little bit of build-out. It's because it's spraying it neat and it's having a hard time getting it out. So you have to clear that off, otherwise you get big spits in there, and that is what happens when you don't have your nozzle covered. Back in there, spraying the collars. And there we go. Hopefully you can see in there, all nice and white, done in one. So at the same time, now we can do this wheel well. Exactly the same manner. We're just going to go around until it's looking wet. Obviously doing it like this, we can go around afterwards and pick out all the detail. Okay, that's that one done. A bit cloudy in here. So exactly the same on the front one as well. A bit tighter down in here. So we'll spray the sides first. Then we'll work our way round. Checking our front, we're okay. Okay. As soon as it's looking a little rather wet, or looks like you get a run or something, then come all off. So first load of paint out. Obviously, if you are a little bit wary about obviously blasting around thick white paint, just take your time, let it dry off a coat and then come back. And there we go. Hopefully you can see we've got no seam line down on the insides. Taken care of it. All white all the way to the back, and then vice versa. All done just like that. Same thing again, flip over. All the angles. All done. Really, really simple. Forget this lark of literally going around and little light coats and spray a bit more and all of that. Really, no need for it. So just come back, just want another shot around this wheel well, have a look inside, see how it's looking. If it's looking okay, which it is, to be honest, so we just use up what paint we've got. Just touch more in. Every now and again, checking into that needle. There we go, round of paint. So now what we do, we leave these all off to one side to dry off. Okay, totally. Then obviously we can go around, pick out these now. It'll be a lot easier to work on these and pick out the colours and the various items we want to sort of highlight, perhaps with a wash, dry brushing, or just by hand painting, all the sort of cables and bits and pieces in the gear before we go ahead and assemble it, because it's got a little bit more area.